What's up, my friend? Welcome to the Finding Direction podcast. My name is Stu Massengill, and I'm here every single week to bring you a passionate guest or message dedicated to helping you find your purpose so that you can live a life full of passion, fulfillment, and happiness. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for hanging out with me, and let's dive in. What's up, my friend? Welcome back to the Finding Direction podcast. This week, we are diving in with KJ Christensen. And a little bit about KJ. She is a speaker, she's an author, she's a former photographer, she is an executive coach. And a few of the things that we dive into on this episode is how can you begin to be resilient when times are tough in your life, and also the importance of being resilient when times are tough. We discuss how do you become an authentic person throughout all of the areas of your life. We discuss why you should start loving yourself more, and we dive into so many other things on this week's episode. We are going to dive right in this week. If you have not yet, make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can continue to hang out with us every single week when we bring you a new episode. And also, if you're enjoying this show, make sure you leave us a review, because that's how we get in front of even more people every single week. So without that, here we go. KJ Christensen, welcome to the Finding Direction podcast.
Hello, my new friend. It's so good to already be here, and we've been jamming for a few, and I just want to swoon on you a little bit. I appreciate you so much. And I was telling you before we started this recording, like, I'm psyched to be here because I feel like I kind of already know you. And that's weird. I know that that's weird, but that's what happens when people are putting out good work and you're seeing them everywhere. And I'm really grateful to be here.
Absolutely. Well, I'm honored to have you here. It's also mutual as well. Obviously, we know each other through social media a little bit, but this is the first official, not in-person conversation, but close to it. And so as we kick this thing off, I would love it if you could kind of give our listeners a little bit of a inside look to basically what was life like for KJ as you were a little girl kind of growing up. What was your early life like?
Wow, that's such a good question. Do you know what I'll say? I think this is really important and not enough people talk about it. Context matters. So when I hear that question of what was I like as like a little girl, I immediately think, well, like, which season of life are we talking about? Which environment are we talking about? You know, which group of people am I engaging with? And what's the energy exchange of that engagement, right? So again, context really matters because everything's relational. So when I think about me or you or any of us, when we look back on our lives, it's important to remember that, right? Because we actually have all these different parts of ourselves that show up in all of these different ways based on that interconnectivity and that, again, that energy, that engagement, and then the environment that gets co-created. So that's the long first kind of pulse when I hear you ask that. And the reason is because when I think, well, if you were to have, let's say, and I do this with clients sometimes, if you were to have like a camera just set up on a tripod, just watching, just giving feedback, unbiased, you know, nobody's narrative or interpretation or assumption put on it, but literally just a camera on a tripod, just like capturing what was happening, how you showed up, how somebody else showed up, how the dynamic was, right? If you were to do that on like little me or little you or little anyone who's listening, in your home life, you're going to be one way. In your school life, you're going to maybe be one way.
Yeah.
For me and for you on stage or on mic, you might be a slightly more elevated way, right? And so I can track back and be like, wow, so little KJ would have been described very differently around different environments or different people, right? So I think I heard you say once, and I would venture to say this is true for a lot of people that end up becoming, ironically, speakers or authors or artists or activists. There tends to be a thread of shyness. There tends to be a thread of some kind of complex trauma or grief or loss that they had to navigate, you know. I think when you peel the curtain back on Oz, let's say, like I was in entertainment for many years, you find that there's some real overlaps, there's some real synchronicities,
Yeah.
right? And I know for myself, if I was to think me at home, I was very shy. I was definitely the little good girl,
Yeah.
and I wanted to be out of the way. So like
Huh.
whatever was not going to add to the problem, I was going to do that. And so
Interesting.
sometimes that looked like people pleasing. Sometimes that looked like being a good student. Sometimes that looked like being frozen and quiet and hiding. Right? But then when I think about how we then, you, me, we, all of us, again, here's another great thing to think about. We often talk about how kids are resilient, and we just got to call bullshit. Kids are actually not resilient. Resiliency is something we learn. It's a skill that we develop. It's a muscle that we have to flex in life as adults later when we've been kicked in the teeth or sucker
Right.
punched.
When we've gone through stuff.
We've gone through stuff, right? But actually, kids are adaptive, right? We're not yet aware enough or skilled enough to be resilient. We're adaptive. We're pivoting all the time. And
Yeah.
so when I think then you ask that question, and I would encourage people who hear that question for themselves in their own lives to also reflect back like, ooh, where did I start donning masks? Where did I start adapting my personality or adjusting because I was
Yeah.
reading the temperature of the room, right?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's a saying I once heard, and I was like, that was really an interesting way to look at your identity as your own self in a sense, where it's like the saying is, I'm not who I think I am. I am not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am.
It's the best. It's literally the best. And I can never
Right.
quote it because it's so good. And you just did an amazing job spitting that out because it's such a mouthful. And I love it.
Yeah.
I think it was was it Brene Brown that I first heard talking about that in a podcast? I don't know. I love it.
It might be. But it's, you know what I mean? It's like your perception of who you are is based on so many other things. And it is interesting when you look back in your childhood. And even, I mean, even as we look back in our life, like when someone gets asked that question, it's like, well, there was good parts, there were bad parts. And as you go throughout your life, you want to ask yourself, what parts of your past are you holding on to? Because sometimes as a human being, it's easier to say, well, that crappy thing happened to me and let me remember that forever. But you don't remember that when you were 12 years old, you did this unbelievable act of kindness that put a smile on somebody's face, and you just happen to forget that thing that could have been another guiding light in your life.
And what you're highlighting there really, and I'm sure you've talked about this on the podcast in other episodes, or you will in the future. I've talked about it ad nauseum. What you're talking about is the negativity bias, right? The negativity bias is the fear-mongering brain. Its job is to look for the problems, scan for the terror, and keep you safe, right? And so it is always going to have this bias, and I think it's 9-1. So for every one negative thing, quote unquote negative, we need 9 positives.
Dang.
In terms of a relationship dynamic and energy and engagement and environment exchange. We need 9 positives for every 1 negative, because the brain will just loop, it'll mentate on that negative because it's trying to keep you safe, right? And that's where mindfulness comes in, and it's so key. And it's also where emotional intelligence comes in, and it's so key. And again, like thinking about, for anybody who's listening or watching, it's such a powerful question that you asked at the beginning. And not to hang on it too long, but what's really telling is to start to peel back the layers and ask yourself, when did I start adapting? And what was the method that I used, right? And some of those methods, it's not that they're not sincere or that they're not your talents or your gifts. So I'm an artist through and through, right? So dancing, performing, speaking, writing, all of those things, when I could show up doing those things, protected me. And so I was able to be totally different, right, than the role that I feel like I thought I had to play, in some home environments, right? And so checking in with yourself, even today, when I'm with this person, how do I show up differently? What am I adapting about my personality or my energy or our engagement in order to make that work? Because so much of us, we're hardwired to belong, right? And then sometimes we sacrifice the becoming piece. Right?
Yeah. Very, very true. So let's say we jump forward in your life, right? So growing up as a little kid, eventually, you have this idea. Your brother's in LA, and you're like, you know what? I'm going to go out there. I'm going to go hang out in LA for a little bit, and it ends up turning into a pretty big chapter of your life. And so I'm curious for you. First off, when you went to LA, did you have an idea of what you kind of wanted to do with your life? And then once you went to LA, what kind of made you decide to continue to pursue the path?
I love this question so much. And how much time do you have is always my response because it's like so many rabbit holes. I think
Totally.
for anybody, and I would guess this is you too, for anybody who's an ambitious, driven, hungry, multi-passionate, creative, entrepreneurial type, we look back, and now I'm very not young. We won't say that I'm old, but I'm very not young. So we look back and we're like, wow, did I go there for like one thing? Because I ended up doing 12 things.
Huh.
And I will say, I don't know that my story is, I was some teenage prodigy or some child prodigy, and I was like, I am destined to go and do this one path. I just knew that where I was in small town New Hampshire was not where I was meant to be. Right?
Yeah.
And so I went for the summer to be my brother's assistant, essentially, right? He was working in the music industry. And then at some point, and this is a trip actually talking to you, I haven't shared this anywhere, but you're the perfect person to share this with.
Heck yeah.
I think I was not even 19 yet. So I hadn't turned 19. I'm 18 years old. It's the summer after my first year of college. I'm out in California. I joked about this on another podcast. I thought because I was a small town girl, I'd never had to make friends. I thought that I was going to arrive and there was going to be like a welcoming committee. Like there's going to be some big, like,
Yeah.
and you're here and here are your friends and here's your life. And that did not happen at all. It was so lonely and I felt so lost. But again, I was only 18 years old, right? So I was not one of those people who knew exactly what I wanted.
Yeah.
But at some point, my brother introduced me to Tony. And we started just immersing ourselves. This is back in like 98. Everything Tony Robbins, right? Day and night. It was like all we could do. This is back when it was like books and tapes, maybe CDs.
So you're listening to it, reading it, all just digesting all of it.
Yeah. And he posed the question to me, what would you do if you couldn't fail? And that's when I said, ooh, I would try this acting thing, which I did. And I had some quick success. And yet it ended up not being the forever path. You know, I got to have some really cool, fun, novel experiences. I don't regret it by any stretch of the imagination. But a few years in, my best friend and then roommate at the time was diagnosed with leukemia. And 18 months later, she died. And that really, as you know, that pivots the trajectory of your life pretty quick.
For sure. Your best friend just gone one day.
And if you're in an industry where you feel at that time like I did, because I'm a survivor, and at that time, this is long before the Me Too movement, it wasn't even talked about, just so marginalized, so trivialized, so sexualized. At some point when life, again, shakes you by the shoulders and resiliency comes knocking, now it's not adaptivity. Now it really is, I got to flex some serious resiliency muscles, and I'm having an existential crisis of who I am and what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. Right? And so then I pivoted and I got behind the camera as a photographer and filmmaker. And then that was always such a fascinating experience too, because really it was the study and the curiosity of human psychology. Because whether I was photographing and filmmaking with A-list talent, or I was on Skid Row doing a documentary type story, or I was, I got to have some cool experiences like Obama's inaugural ball and shooting a lot of the concert photography and getting, interact with like Common and will.i.am and like Ariana Huffington, like really cool experiences, right? No matter which end of the spectrum, whether it was an A-lister or it was an everyday folk, or it was somebody in like real hardship, like on Skid Row, my inclination was actually to put the camera down and to just ask them the story. Like, how did you get here?
Yeah.
Right. And so then that transitioned me into coaching and speaking and podcasting.
Yeah.
The pivots are all throughout.
All throughout. And one thing I would love to hear your thought and sort of what was going through your mind at one point is death, we'll just call it as it is a gnarly thing. And I was just working with a group of people this week, and one of the things we were talking about is how every decision that you make in your life and that every thing that happens to you in your life, that if you're willing to look for it, there's always a blessing, a lesson, a teaching, something you can learn from that or get from that to prepare you for the next phase of your life. And so I'm only imagining you're 23 years old, one of your best friends in the world all of a sudden has, this crazy C word starts to, and then they end up passing. And I've been very fortunate enough in my life to not have a lot of death around me. I haven't experienced much death at all. And I'm knock on wood, I hope I don't for a long time. But from what I've heard, when someone close to you passes, it changes everything about the way you think. I mean, it has a massive impact on you. And I'm curious for, one, for anybody that's listening to this, if they maybe went through something similar, maybe there's a lesson they can get here. But I'm curious, as you went through that and you're 23 and you're getting into acting and you're having success, like what was the biggest shift that went through your mind as that happened? Because obviously externally it created a pivot in your life, but internally, what was like the biggest shift that started to happen?
Do you know what comes up for me? I mean, I could tell you so many stories. I mean, I remember the defining moment, just to sort of paint a picture. I was in Vegas, and I've told this story before. I was in Vegas. I was on a really cheesy B horror film. I think I just shot like a sexy, quirky calendar. It was like really dumb for like barely any money. And my friend was in hospice. And I'm 23. I don't even fully grasp the gravity of what that is.
Yeah.
But she ended up dying, just a couple of weeks later. And I remember being dragged through the desert at 3 a.m. for this night shoot where I'm playing this like stupid girl that's dead, but still hot. So stupid. And just thinking, like, what the hell am I doing? My friend is dying. Like, what am I doing? And I think we all have those turning point, pivotal moments. And as you get older, you've had a few, right? So
Right.
When I hear people talk about fear of missing out and you only live once, and they haven't had loss, whether that's a divorce, whether that's a humiliation, a betrayal, whether it's a career failure, a business failure, whether it's death, sickness, right? There's an entitlement piece there. That's part of being young, right? But it's missing the reverence. So I think as you've gotten older and as you've faced more trying times and you've come back more times, it's less about a fear of missing out and you only live once from the perspective of like, fuck it, I'm entitled, life's so short. And it's more about, wow, life's really short, hold your people close.
So that was one of the big shifts for you then, is
huge.
You got one life, sort of.
Huge. And for me, again, everything's paradox, right? I believe in nuance. And I think, again, like I said at the top, context really matters, right? So I think part of my fear of missing out is a fear, again, it comes more from reverence of, I want to love, honor, and accept what is. Again, it's that sort of stoic perspective. I don't want to make it worse than it is. I don't want to make it better than it is. I just want to like love, honor, and steep myself in the beauty of this moment and these people. And Esther Perel, I was going to start to say, she's someone, I'm a huge fan of her work. And I think there's a lot of overlap in the way that she, teaches and speaks and writes, where, again, I think the sort of superficial idea of fear of missing out is that you want to be dazzled, right? That you need to be entertained, right? And that the moment you get restless, or the moment it gets hard, or the moment it's not sexy anymore, or nobody's watching, you're not getting the fanfare, the moment you start to have that existential angst and think like, I want more, that you don't bail. You don't blame anyone or anything outside of yourself, and you don't blow everything up, and you don't bail. Instead, and again, I created this framework called the freedom framework, which is all about energy, engagement, and environment. It's like, oh, no, 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 no. If something is feeling off, if you're feeling bored, if you're feeling sad, scared, stuck, restless, it's cueing in with yourself. Like, how am I engaging? What's my energy all about? What's my internal environment all about? And then how is that adding to or taking from this co-created environment? And when you do that litmus test, let's say for like 90 days, and you own the parts that you need to own, then you can say, yep, I did my absolute best and it's still not a culture fit. Yep, I did my absolute best and damn, I wish this wasn't true, but I've outgrown this place, this project, this person, this path. And it's gonna suck and it's gonna hurt like hell, but I gotta own it. I gotta steep myself in some better soil, and I gotta be kind and considerate and thoughtful when I pivot, right?
And I love the thought you put to it as well, where it's having that check-in with yourself, but not once a year, not once a month even. It's like, if you said, I know you're saying 90 days, but even if you were like for 7 days or for 2 weeks or for a month, like, I'm going to check in, I'm going to see where I'm at, and I'm going to listen to that internal compass, and I'm going to take action based on what that internal compass is telling me. Even if you just did that for a week, 2 weeks, everything in your life would start to look a little bit different. And so, as we keep going in your life, I'm curious. So, at some point you're doing acting and then you go into photography. And I know you touched on it a little bit, but you make a big shift from photography to now coaching people and speaking and doing some of this, more like one-on-one work with people. And I'm curious, what was the shift for you to go from, okay, I'm doing photography and, I'm doing great work, to all of a sudden, again, this doesn't feel right, or I feel called to do something else. What was that sort of pivot? How did that kind of happen?
I think, again, I touched on it a little bit. There was an experience that I was having over and over and over and over again, where I kept wanting to put the camera down and have a conversation with people and get to the story behind the story, right? And so there was a graduation, right? Like, photography allowed me to do that to an extent. Documentary film producing allowed me to do that to even more of an extent, because now, without even putting the camera down, we're getting the story behind the story. That is what story producing is, right?
Yeah.
But even then, I would notice that when the camera was on, people would turn something on. And it was the in-between moments when the camera was off, or they thought the camera was off. We were talking about this before we started recording, right? Or the key light got turned off, and I would watch. And if you've ever been on a production set, which I'm sure you have, you've seen this. And again, this could be A-listers, or this could have been, an entrepreneur who was doing a branding shoot, right? It really didn't matter. Their whole nervous system would change. Their whole physiology would change, right? And I became more interested in what was going on with that person, right? Because, and I don't know if you would feel this, I would think you would feel this, because you and I just had an interaction before we started recording, and you feel exactly the same, right? I want to live my life where there is no difference between how I am on this podcast, how I am on a stage, how I am sitting on the couch in my living room, whether that's in an IG Live or that's talking to like my nearest and dearest, right?
Yeah.
I want to not necessarily share every little nook and cranny of my life. I think that's insane. People have earned rights to your story, and they've earned a level of intimacy and trust within your life, right?
Right.
But energetically, I want to have there not be a difference. Like, when I walk onto a stage, or I am moderating a panel, or we're doing this, and I think, again, like, you're exactly the same as you were before we started recording.
Thank you.
That's a level of peace.
It is. Internal peace too.
Yes. So you could talk about it from two perspectives. You could talk about it from like serenity and sanity, right? Like the psychology piece and the physiology piece. Like, oh my God, I just get to be me. And you either like me or you don't like me. Sorry, you're hearing my puppy. She's about to go bananas. So
no worries.
everyone. I apologize. But see, exactly, even like that, right? Like
Yeah,
I get to
real life.
still be a full human, right? I don't have to pretend that I don't have a puppy who's about to go bananas. Like I get to be like, oh yeah, and there's my puppy going bananas. And I think we could even take this conversation into a pivot a bit. You look at company cultures and this great resignation and the companies that do not get the memo that people, particularly young people, certainly creative, entrepreneurial, multi-passionate people like you and I, want to be in an environment and want to work on teams where they can be their whole self.
100%.
They can bring their full life. Like if you are not culture focused in terms of inclusivity, certainly, but also in terms of allowing people to feel psychologically safe, that they can belong and they can become, and that in order to do that, they don't have to feel siloed, they don't have to pretend and mask up, like they get to just be themselves.
Well, let me ask you this, because how would you say someone gets, like if someone goes, okay, maybe if I'm being honest and I'm listening to you guys and maybe I am a little different when I'm around this person or that or this work and then friends, and then like how do you think someone gets to a place of feeling like they are one authentic person through any environment or place that they're in? Like how does someone get to that authentic? And I call it authentic, maybe you have a different word for it, but how does someone get to that place of having that sense of peace where no matter where I am, I'm the same person?
Well, I think it's practice, right? So lots of people, we could take it just to some pragmatics. Lots of people listening, I'm guaranteeing you, want to do what you do, want to do what I do, right? They want to write books, they want to have a TED Talk, they want to keynote, they want to coach, they want to be on big stages, whatever it is. Ask yourself, you, my friends who are watching and listening, are you actually practicing and in dance with doing that thing? Because when you clock 10,000 hours, and I don't care if no one is watching, right? I tweet every day. Ask me how many people see my tweets. About 0. But I do that as a writing practice for me every single day because it's A, who I am, right? It's an identity. Writing is a huge part of who I am. B, it's an awesome way to be able to pre-produce a thought of the day sort of deck of cards or a thought of the day journal or book, right? So I have in my mind, I do that to nourish myself, energize myself, create before I consume for myself, keep that energy tank full. And I also am pre-producing a very low-hanging fruit book or planner or journal, right? Because I'll take all of that content and it's already done. So I think a big piece from a pragmatic standpoint is, are you just talking about doing the thing? Are you romanticizing and fantasizing and maybe even feeling jealous or frustrated that you're not yet doing the thing, but you're imagining you would love to do it? But until you actually start doing it, you have no idea. You might start doing it and hate it. You might be like, oh,
you got to try things.
This sucks. This isn't a fit for me at all, right? And then the other piece that I would say is really, again, I call it the serenity setup. And it's these different pillars. It's stoicism, it's surrender, it's strategy, and it's storytelling. When you bake yourself every day in these different practices, right? Stoicism being like, how can I love, honor, and accept what is? Not make it worse than it is, not make it better than it is. How can I be stoic and just face what is?
Yeah.
How can I surrender? How can I turn it over to something bigger than myself? That doesn't have to be God or Buddha or Allah or, spirituality. It could literally just be mysteries that you don't know. It could be some will, maybe it's Mother Nature, bigger than your own, right? Yeah. And strategy, like what is just the next right thing that I need to do given this season of life, given this stage of my business or my career, to pivot in the most effective way so that I can actually enhance my performance. And then storytelling, what is the story you're telling yourself about yourself? Like that quote you said. Or what's the story you're telling yourself about somebody else or something else? When those four pillars are all standing, you actually have the foundation to begin setting yourself up for serenity, no matter what.
Yeah.
And that's in times of crisis, that's in times of chaos, that's in times of a launch when things are exciting, but you're like, oh my God, I'm in the weeds, there's so much to do, I can't get it all done. It's like you need those four pillars. Again, it's like the serenity setup to keep the castle standing, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I think one piece of it too, if I could add a third thing in there,
What?
is I think part of being your authentic self and having that inner peace in different places, uh, there's a part of it that's self-love because you know,
Oh,
you know what I mean? Because sometimes we may go to a different environment, whether it's a different group of friends or work or whatever. And in a sense, I think as a human being, one of the biggest things we want in life is just to be loved, right? We want to have love, be loved. And sometimes we're around other people, we're trying to put on a self that's going to let other people accept us or like us. And if we're not self-loving of ourselves, then we may go try to change ourselves so that we get acceptance from other people. But if we can find a way, um, and I only say this because I've gone through that
we've
journey
all
in a
done
sense
it.
and still going through it. But going from a place where I had zero self-love to really learning to love myself. And then when you start to go in different places, environments, you go in and you know you love yourself. And if you go into a place and people don't like you, well, that's okay. It's not like a negative thing if they don't like it. It's just okay. I'm me, and if they don't like me, then that's perfectly fine. It's not a negative connotation to it, but it's owning yourself, loving yourself, and then you have so much more peace as you go into these different places of your life because you go, okay, now I just get to be one person as I go through all these different aspects. I don't have to try to be this and then that and then you know what I mean? All these different things like a chameleon. You're just you love yourself. And it's truly, truly beautiful way to go throughout life.
I love what you just said. And like when I think about loving yourself, the lesson that I have come to learn, my friend, and I had to learn it so many times, but I'm so grateful, is, when I think about love, again, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, think about belonging, right? We're hardwired to need and want to
Yeah,
feel like we belong,
100%.
that we're safe. It's part of our survival, right?
Yeah.
And it's no secret. I've talked about it, I've written about it, I've podcasted about it, I've coached about it. I know what it's like to hustle for your worth. I know what it's like to feel rejected, betrayed, to feel like the little match girl who got kicked out of her life and is like looking in at her old life. Like, I know what it feels like to feel orphaned. I know what it feels like to be a late bloomer and be embarrassed about the fact that, like, ooh, I thought I was going to have kids. I might be facing like a child-free future. I've never said that, out loud publicly, but that's a tender spot for me, right? Because it's
Yeah.
a whole different vision than what
Yeah.
I cast, right?
Right.
And so that thing that you're talking about when you can self-love and self-soothe and radically honor and accept who you are, foibles and all,
Yeah.
I think what it really is, and this is the lesson I've learned, is you stop trying to fit in. You stop trying to shrink. That's what I did, at least, to belong. And you come to this understanding like, oh, I belong wherever I go.
Yeah.
Wherever my feet
Yes.
are, I belong.
Yeah.
Right. And now I'm not tap dancing or spinning plates trying to get you to like me because I like me.
Right.
I don't need you to tell me who I am or who I'm not. I know who I am.
Yeah.
Right.
And when you're authentically you, your feet take you to the place you're supposed to go. When you're not authentically you, your feet may take you to a place and you go, I'm not really happy here. It's because, well, you weren't the authentic version. Like you were being somebody else who was led to a different place. But if you were just yourself, you'd go exactly where you were supposed to go.
Yeah.
Right. So it's again coming back to that self-love, that authenticity,
Mm-hmm.
um, and just really learning to channel that aspect of you, because I think we would both be in agreement that it is a much more peaceful, joyful, happy, just it's a more lovely life when you get to be one version of yourself and yourself as you go to all these different places in your life. And so, KJ, I feel like we could be here for hours and hours and hours and
Yeah,
dive through so many parts of life. We may have to do a part 2. We'll see. But I'm curious, kind of as we wind down here, for anybody that's, listening to you and they're going, man, I need some more KJ. I need to see what you're up to. I know you're doing so many different things in the world. I'm curious, where is the best place people can kind of find you and see what you're up to?
Well, you just literally made my day. And I just want to thank you and pour some love on you and appreciate
Absolutely.
you first and foremost. Secondly, you can always go to kjchristensen.com and you can, I think this would be really valuable to people. If you feel like you need a reset, right? Maybe that's a reset in your energy. Maybe that's a reset in your relationship. Maybe that's a reset in your career or your business focus or trajectory. Really starting like simple, stupid with this 3-part framework that I have, the freedom framework, I think would be really valuable. So we'll figure out how to do it or where to do it. Maybe you can do it in your after episode or something.
Perfect.
The first piece, which is the energy tracker. And I just really encourage and invite anybody who wants to really take notice of like, man, am I putting things in the joy tank? Am I putting things in the gratitude tank? Am I doing what I need to do to make sure my physiology is good and my psychology is good and my strategy then can be aligned, right? Before you go and make some big decision, right? Like bailing on a job or bailing on a person, right? Or bailing on a path. All in the spirit of what we're talking about. Like if you want more ease, if you want more peace, if you want more joy, if you want to feel like there's that flow,
Yeah.
that is a good place to start, my friends. So kjchristensen.com. And then Instagram is KJ_Christensen. And I'm always having great little walkie-talkies with people in the DMs. So it's super fun. If you haven't done it, I've met so many amazing people that were listening to the podcast and then they found me or they came to a live event or maybe someone had coached with me. So it's such a fun thing. I encourage you to do it. Just send
Okay, I'm
little
gonna check it
audio
out.
back and forth on Instagram. And then last, like I said, nobody knows I exist on Twitter. So you could be one of the first ones. And we'll give you that link. We'll give you that link as well.
All right, perfect. And so, one last question I have for you, and this question we ask all of our guests because we want to help people find direction, but we definitely believe in doing it through action. Is what would you say is one thing someone listening to this can do in the next 24 to 48 hours to start finding direction in their life?
Ooh. I would say the energy tracker. So go ahead and DM me and I'll figure out how to get that to you immediately. Or again, like we said, we'll put a link. The other thing, having, Tony talks about this, and this is part of that energy tracker as well. Having the recognition that before I'm going to pour into anyone else, I've got to pour into myself. So I think he calls it the hour of power. He talks about priming, right?
Yeah.
I have done that for a bazillion years, 20 years,
Yeah.
right? Like 22 years, right? And when I do it, my life is my own. No matter what circumstantially might be challenging or might be hard or might be exhausting or scary, my life still feels like my own. When my head hits the pillow, I can feel proud. When my feet touch the floor, I can feel enthusiastic. And it's the reason, I swear to you, that people will often talk about, and I'm sure they do this for you too, I just like being around you, like you just have good energy. Because I do that first.
Do the
So
work.
the immediate thing is before you pick up your little phone, before you start responding and reacting to everybody else's needs, emails, DMs, social media, before you start consuming, really, truly, I want you to create energy and engagement for things that you're excited about, right? And just maybe it's not an hour, maybe it's 10 minutes, right?
Right.
Something that is yours that makes your life your own. First, top of the day, right when your eyeballs wake up.
Love it.
Yeah.
Love it. Well, KJ, it's been an absolute honor to have you here. Thank you so much for your wisdom, your nuggets, your just spirit in general. I know there's been so much value people are going to get from this episode. So thank you so much for being here. And we all appreciate you on the Finding Direction podcast.
Thank you. Don't be a stranger. We'll do this again. We'll have you on the podcast. Let's do an IG Live, something. Get you out to Laguna.
Perfect.
You got to come to Laguna.
There we go.
All right.